And good morning. We are live on Forging the Falcons, and this is not Nick Kendall to my this side of things. This is my esteemed guest, Aaron Freeman. Aaron is the host of Locked On Falcons, and I've been following his work for several years. Does a great job, and Aaron was good enough to get up with me. Not everybody wants to do this in the morning every time, but I told you, I said I don't like to compete with you heavy hitters in the evening. Besides, I can't stay up that late anymore, man. I'm old. I like the morning shows where I can hit the coffee. So, Aaron, I appreciate you joining us on Forging the Falcons this morning, and looking forward to some of your takes. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. I got a couple of cups of coffee in me. I might wind up having to take a nap a little bit later in the day because I'm not used to, giving my Falcons takes this early in the morning. But we'll see how it goes.
Well, it should go good pretty well. Yesterday, it was an interesting game. It was kind of a flip the script game from what we've seen with the Falcons before. And I think I tweeted, and it was actually just before the Darren Hall punch out fumble. I was in the process of tweeting because at that point it looked like the Rams were going to go down and go ahead and get the go ahead score and put this thing to bed. And I'm like, all right, the Falcons aren't winning this game, but this has been a hell of a lot more fun than the opposite, where an L is an L at the end, but it is so mind-numbingly frustrating to just sit back there and watch. I mean, we've turned it into a verb, a description. Watch them falcon a game away. So, as that game was finished, what was your kind of initial reaction? What was your gut reaction at the end of that game?
It was a little disappointing to see the team get so close coming back and to kind of basically throw it away at the goal line on that Jalen Ramsey interception. But I was heartened. I came away from this game mostly positive because this team didn't give up in this game. They could have easily just rolled over and died, when the score was 31-10 at the beginning of the fourth quarter and let the Rams do whatever they wanted to salt that game away. But they didn't give up. That was the big issue last week, not finishing that game when they were up 16 points in the fourth quarter against the Saints. And they did their best to finish this game. So I think I come away similar to the week one game. I have more good than bad coming away from the first two games for the Falcons this year.
And do you think some of that has to do with your expectations going in? I think, the fans, my expectations for this team when the schedule initially came out, I think I said 2-15, Aaron. I may have given a flip on another one and gone to 3-14, but I seriously doubt I went over 3 wins. It's just, for me, I just look at the roster. I see $100 million of salary that isn't on the field. It's in other places. I see the holes that are on the team, and I wasn't sure how that they had been addressed, specifically right tackle and left guard, 2 gaping holes on the offensive line. And then it looked like the teams that you think that were normally beatable were all on the road. Next week you go to Seattle. Okay, well, that's a team you think, okay, you can win the game. But man, going to Seattle is no easy feat, especially after just going to LA. So what were kind of your expectations going in? So therefore, do you think that helps, assuming that they weren't sky high? Do you think that helps with, okay, I can see the positives. I can see where this team is going.
Yeah, absolutely. I had low expectations as well. I like when the schedule dropped, I thought they were a 4-win team. I think Ridder's performance in the preseason gave me a little bit more optimism going into the season to move it to 5 wins officially. But I thought, similar to you, this team was going to be really bad in the trenches. And I just could not see a way against this schedule, against these matchups with a lot of teams that are either really good on the offensive line or really good on the defensive line. If the Falcons were going to be potentially a bottom 5 team in both of those areas on their offensive and defensive line, that they would be able to find ways to win these games. They're skill position players. This is not Matt Ryan and Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley led skill position players. They have some good young players there, but they're not there yet to be able to overcome their deficiencies in the trenches. And because I had those sort of bottom shelf expectations for their play in the trenches, these first 2 games, I think the Falcons' play in the trenches has been much better than I thought possible at this point in the season. Their offensive line has not been an absolute disaster. I thought Aaron Donald would absolutely eviscerate their offensive front. And that was not really the case
Mhm.
on Sunday. Like, he certainly made his fair share of plays because he's Aaron Donald,
Yeah.
but like it wasn't one of those things where like the Falcons it's impossible for them to block this guy. And he was mostly contained relative to sort of those expectations. They were able to run the ball effectively in both of the first two games this year. And, their defensive line hasn't been great or anything, but the 4 sacks in week one were 4 more sacks than I probably thought going into the season they would have at this point in the season. So like, because as you say, like, because I had these, really low expectations, I've been heartened by what I've
Mhm.
seen so far for this team. And I feel like their trench play, rather than being this bottom 5 team and arguably the worst team in the league, and from a trench standpoint, which is what my expectations were going into the season. Maybe the Bears might have been worse, but outside of that, very few teams, lower than them on that totem pole. I feel like their trench play has been closer to league average so far in the season, and that gives me a lot more confidence moving forward that this team will be a lot more competitive moving forward. Now, whether that results in significantly more wins moving forward, than my initial prediction of 5-12, we'll see. But I do feel like this team is going to be a lot more competitive in a lot of these games than I thought they were going into the year.
All right, you hit on about 10. I have to keep notes because there's about 10 things that had follow-ups on there that I wanted to hit. And I remember hearing those keywords that are like bing, like Desmond Ridder. I want to touch back on Desmond Ridder. The trench play, especially, on the offensive line, because you're going in there, you're thinking the trench play was a disaster last year. It only takes one gaping hole, and the Falcons had two last year. And you go and you replace Jalen Mayfield with a journeyman right tackle. Well, Eli Wilkinson's been pretty good. He's
Mhm.
held his own. Like you said, even a step up to bad is a huge step up. From the worst, maybe the worst offensive lineman in the NFL to just below average is a big step up. And Caleb McGarry for me has been really, really good. Just not necessarily, okay, is he the best right tackle in the league, but we're talking about one of the worst right tackles in the league to now I actually think he is above average. He's playing above average. And Lindstrom's Lindstrom. I think Lindstrom is playing really well too. The center spot still a bit of a question, but I've been as impressed with Caleb McGarry's step up to a point where it makes me happy, and it also pisses me off that it's taken to year 4.
I get that. I get that. Yeah. I'm infamous, I guess, in some circles for being stuck on Caleb McGarry Island last year, mostly because I defended Caleb McGarry last season just because I thought relative to Jalen Mayfield's performance, like McGarry's performance at right tackle, while not good, was passable. Like
Right.
you could survive if you have a bad right tackle, because there are ways of being able to mask that issue for your offense with chips and rolling protections and all these various things that you can do schematically to mask the fact that you have a below average starting right tackle. I don't think you can really mask, what Jalen Mayfield was putting out there. There's just no way to hide for your offense. And as you say, Elijah Wilkinson has been a significant. I thought Aaron Donald was going to absolutely wreck him in this game, and any sort of positivity that we had for Elijah Wilkinson coming off of week one would be completely erased. And I think he played, from what I could see, we'll see what the all 22 says, but from what I could see watching the game live and then rewatching it again this morning, I thought he played really well in this game. So it does feel like the Falcons have made strides from an offensive line standpoint. I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch, because I've known the Falcons offensive line to make strides and then completely walk that back as the rest of the year progresses. But so far, I've been very heartened by what I've seen from this team up front.
So let me now that the chat's opened up a little bit, the Facebook algos are kicking in. I want to say good morning to some folks that have come in. So Luke Wright says good morning, Scott. Good morning, Scott and Aaron. Good morning. Good morning, Luke. Appreciate you being here. And Dave is always with us on YouTube as well. Says good morning, guys. And Joe Cannon coming in says great morning, Scott and Aaron. Aiden Munden, young buck, Temple grad who's just started, or Temple journalism student who's just started contributing on All Falcons. So welcome in, Aiden. Albert Knoppers, one of our Broncos fans. And Aaron, I forgot to warn you, I do so much stuff with the Mile High Huddle crew. We get a lot of crossover in here. So we get a lot of Broncos fans. So if you hear me like making references back to how this is significant, how this parallels to the Broncos, we've got a lot of crossover fans in here. Albert's one of those guys. Richie Rich, he comes in, he says, I think we've seen everything we need to from Marcus Mariota. It's time to play Ridder. And RC Plane Builder kind of says this. Oh, actually, it was a little bit farther down. Jason L. And then I want to hit on this one before we say hello to some more folks. Jason L., good morning. Stacking the plates there. Looks like he's going for about a 500-pound deadlift. Says Mariota is not a clutch passer. He is not accurate. The only time I see him being accurate are on rollouts to the right specifically. On this note, I was actually listening to the Falcons broadcast last week, and Dave Archer, who played quarterback for the Falcons way back in the dark days, was talking about when he drops back in the pocket, his feet get quiet. You know, we always kind of made fun of Peyton Manning. He always looked like he had happy feet in there. He was always kind of dancing around. Well, that was how he kept his feet moving, and he could plant and throw. So it made him look nervous at times, but it was always incredibly effective. So, Jason, I think your point on this is when he's rolling out, his feet are moving, and he's able to deliver more accurately. Now, I said yesterday, Aaron, that he kind of brackets decent, adequate, pretty good looking good quarterback play with disasters. You know, it's like, okay, we're good. Oh my God. And one game, I haven't watched him a ton in the NFL. You know, I didn't watch him at Vegas. He didn't play much at Vegas, but I didn't watch him at Tennessee to know if that was his downfall there. But one game is kind of okay, let's clean that up. 2 games, now I'm a little worried about it. You know, do you think it's time to see Desmond Ridder?
You know, I've been firmly on the Desmond Ridder hype train for the last month since his debut in the preseason. So I would not be upset if the Falcons turn the page on Marcus Mariota for that reason, just so I can get back at the people commenting on my YouTube videos back in August saying I didn't know what I was talking about. But, you know, I'm petty like that. But I don't think the Falcons have to feel rushed to get Ridder out there because, again, part of that is, I think, due to my low expectations. Like, you're not a playoff team, so it's not as if, like, you need Ridder out there to get you the spark, to get your playoff hopes back on track. I'm sure Arthur Smith thinks that this team is a playoff team, but, like, you know, I don't think.
Does he, though? You know, does he?
I mean, he'll say that, right? Like,
they say all of that, but then, you know, I always say, don't watch what they say. Don't listen to what they say. Watch what they do. And every single move that Fontenot and Smith have made, and they say they work as a team, every single move they have made has pointed to 2023 for the last 2 years. Every single one. I think if they were a little more hedgy in their press conferences, oh, we're here to win. You hired the wrong guys. If you weren't here to win now, my ass. You know, you're not here to win now. You're building something. You've got half a salary cap, literally half your salary cap available to you. You know, and if somebody says, you know, oh, what do you think about being ranked 32? You know, we don't pay too much attention to that stuff. We're here to work, and we're going to go out there and, you know, the old Crash Davis, by golly, give it all for the team, you know? So, you know, does he think that this is a team to go out and make a playoff push?
No, I think you nailed it there. I don't think at the end of the day they really truly believe that. But I do think they will make their best effort to, at least on the surface, appear to be a team competing. So I expect Mariota to certainly start against Seattle. I expect the Falcons to win this game at this point in time. I predicted going into the season that they'd probably beat the Browns in week 4. So, you know, I think Arthur Smith will be, you know, talking a lot of trash at his post-game press conferences if they do wind up getting 2 wins in a row here. You know, talking about how people buried the team, and, you know, as he is wont to do. I get it. Look, I'm petty too, so I can't get mad at another person for being petty.
I don't see him pumping his chest too much, though. That was the one thing, going back to the Broncos discussion. You know, I started following them last year, and I was doing some work with those guys. And Vic Fangio was not press friendly. And his biggest asshat moment for him was after beating the Cowboys badly, as he stood up there and puffed out his chest with his 15-35 record. I think Arthur Smith will. When I've seen him have success, it's like, listen, we've said this team's going to fight. They're going to give it all we've got. He doesn't praise anybody except the team as a whole. That's when you seem to get him the worst. It's like, oh, do you feel pretty good about how rookie Tyler Algier played? All those guys, they all worked hard. Chris Lindstrom blocked well, and Keith Smith was in there doing work. He won't praise a player, but he handles success the little bit they have. But they won 7 games last year. I think he handles that better than the adversity when he's with the negativity, which you could use a little humbling on both sides, Coach.
Fair enough. I think it's fair.
Ridder going in, as Joe Cannon comes in, one of our great Facebook contributors, he says, Mariota isn't comfortable in the pocket. Ridder showed his poise in the pocket in the preseason with the backups. Imagine him with the starters. Yeah, it's different. He's playing against backups though too, is part of that. He's playing against second and third team guys. But again, as I was getting ready for the show, Aaron, I was just thinking about Mariota. There's several sayings you hear all the time, you can't, that I've kind of flipped around, which is, you can't measure somebody's heart. And I say, yeah, but you can damn sure tell if someone's got one or not, so yeah, you can't measure it. And for this one, I'm thinking, we talk about the it factor. What is the it factor? The poise, the clutch gene, whatever it is. Mariota doesn't have it. He's just missing. He seems to have everything else, but he's just missing it. That poise where you just never felt like, at least I didn't. But again, I've been an Atlanta sports fan for 40 years. Okay, well, we're making a good run at this. We're even getting a little extra hope with a punch out in the ball and down 6 or 4 or whatever it is, need a touchdown. We'll make a nice go at it, but in the end, it'll fall short. And I actually have a question for you on this one, Aaron. For all of Matt Ryan's comeback wins, did any of them come with a touchdown? I can't remember a one.
Very few. Yeah.
I can't remember one. They were all basically get in a field goal range and hit the field goal. I don't remember needing a touchdown and getting one. I remember Steve Sarkisian falling short against the Philadelphia Eagles 2 times in a row, once in the playoffs, then they go on and win, and then once in the opening game of the season on the exact same situation. I remember those vividly, but I don't remember scoring.
Yeah, that was kind of a thing with Matt Ryan, where if you needed to go the length of the field and score a touchdown, the Falcons didn't come through that often. There was a couple, because I do remember looking it up several years ago, and there's a couple, but it's a literal handful when you look at those like 40 or however many game-winning drives and comebacks, fourth quarter comebacks that he had across his career in Atlanta. You could probably count on one hand how many of those ended with the Falcons scoring a touchdown when they needed to score a touchdown. When it comes to Mariota, like, he's just not a precise passer. Like, that's never really been his game. His game has always been more of that gunslinger, roll outside the pocket, heave it up deep to, Rashad Matthews when he was with the Titans, or AJ Brown or Corey Davis or whoever it was back then. And we've seen some of that, that ability to extend plays outside the pocket and keep things alive and make some plays that way. But if you want him to sort of be that standard 3-step, 5-step drop back quarterback and throw the ball with timing and rhythm, that's not really his strength. And I think the one thing you will say about Desmond Ridder, regardless of the quality of the competition he was facing in the preseason, that wasn't an issue for him. Throwing with precision and timing and rhythm within the offense, so the right receiver making the right reads, that was not a problem for him. And I think that's where the optimism, I think, from a lot of Falcon fans comes, that if you insert Ridder into the lineup, if he was able to do that with backups, even going against backups, what can he do against with starters, guys that can actually make those plays when he's throwing it. And so,
sorry, go ahead.
And so I think it makes sense for people to want to see what Ridder can do. And we'll sort of see, I think ultimately Mariota and this team need to win some games over the next couple of weeks to sort of stave off that conversation.
Yeah. So probably going to see, was this a fair summary? I think we're going to see Desmond Ridder before the season's over, just not this week.
Yeah. This goes back to some of the arguments I've had with various Falcon fans and non-Falcon fans over the last couple of months, that I've always seen Mariota as a bridge quarterback, that
Mhm.
he's
Well,
here
that's
to
why you
give
got a
you
1-year deal.
competent, quarterback play, so that you can evaluate Drake London, you can evaluate Kyle Pitts, you can see what this offensive line looks like, you can see what this running game looks like, what this defense looks like, so that you're not sitting here, if you were to throw Desmond Ridder to the Wolves in a hypothetical situation from get-go, and you're just watching a quarterback get his butt kicked every single week, and you just can't run functional offense because you don't have a NFL ready quarterback. Now, again, I think what Ridder showed this summer tells us that maybe he's probably ahead of expectations in that regard. But like, if you're not going to win games, and the Falcons schedule did not set up well for them to win a ton of games early in the season, then at some point, once you get probably, I've sort of circled that week 8 game against Carolina at home as a prime opportunity when the schedule gets a little bit softer, that if you're basically out of playoff contention by that point, why wouldn't you turn the keys over to Desmond Ridder at this point? But I think right now, we're having that conversation probably a month or so earlier than at least I thought we probably would. And I think we might be having that basically it's kind of a must-win game for Marcus Mariota this week against Seattle, because if they start the season 0-3, much again, I know there's Scott and you and myself aren't surprised by an 0-3 start, but at the same time, it's like the Seattle game is one of your most winnable games. And if Mariota is going to get any wins this year, you feel like Seattle's the perfect opportunity. If they can't pull it off there, he does not play well. And you see this sort of inconsistency that we've seen these last 2 weeks continue this week, then I do think there's going to be a much, much louder conversation that Ridder should be starting as early as week 4 against Cleveland at home. So, there is a ticking clock on Marcus Mariota at this point.
Our friend Kenny Brooker comes in. He says, I thought we were on with Marcus Spears. So it's Peyton Manning. That's the one I get all the time with the big forehead. You see, he looks like Peyton Manning, everybody that comes in the first time. So it's
Marcus
Peyton Manning and Marcus Spears coming in and talking some football. Kenny kind of steps out, and we'll change subjects for just a moment here. He says, when Lattimore and Evans got ejected, who do you think was the bigger loss to their team? I think a wide receiver is easier to place than a top defensive back when you've got multiple weapons in Tom Brady. That's my take on that. And as I said, when I saw it, Tom Brady will be happy to pay Mike Evans fine for him. You come up and you've got my back. Thank you, sir. Dinner on me tonight.
I would agree. We know that matchup has gone heavily in Marshawn Lattimore's favor these last couple of years. Evans did make some plays on Sunday, so he seemed to get him back relative to what we've seen, where he's kind of been blanked in some of these games and only had one catch against Lattimore. But I would agree with you. I think losing Lattimore really is a devastating blow for that Saints defense, more so than Mike Evans was for the Bucs offense, even though the Bucs were already down a whole bunch of receivers. But as you say, when you have Tom Brady, I'm not going to say you and I can go out there and win games in Tampa Bay, but you don't have to be that much better than.
But I'm not as wide receiver dependent when I've got the quarterback, which we'll get into draft here in a little bit. We've got about 15 minutes or so, and then we'll get going. One of the comments I heard that we were talking about Mariota, and I kind of wanted to sum up and see if you agreed with me. Mariota versus Ridder. Mariota, and I got to see him in high school. That's what I used to do back in the day, was scout high school players. And I got to see him. He was actually playing in an all-star game in South Carolina, all the way from Hawaii. And Mariota always struck me as the athlete playing quarterback, where Ridder is a quarterback who's an athlete. He is a good pocket passer, so people forget how freaking fast he is. He can fly. So,
yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing that ability and see what they can do. So what would it take for you to see out of Ridder this year to think that I don't need a quarterback in the draft next year?
Yeah, I don't think the bar is that high. I don't think you need to feel like Ridder, he doesn't have to go out there and if he starts 10 games or whatever and lead this team on a 7-3 record or anything like that. I just think you kind of have to see a guy that's not lost, right? A guy that looks like he's NFL ready. and you're not out there getting like bottom 3 quarterback. Like, the bar is so low for rookies at this point in
Right.
time. Like we've seen so many rookies come in and play well, but the reality is that most of them are bad. Most of them are frankly terrible.
I mean, the media fawned over Mac Jones last year for being a little below average. You know, when you look, he was a little bit below average NFL quarterback. Well, that's great for a rookie. I'm like, miss me on this man stuff. Jamar Chase is rookie of the year. Get out of here. You know, don't tell me Mac Jones, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
Going into, you mentioned last year a little bit, and we were talking about the quarterback dependency and the offensive line, and does it really matter who you've got here if you can't do this? You know, Aaron, that's kind of how I felt about the past 2 drafts. Going in, and more so, no, both of them. I was pretty against taking a pass catcher in both of them. To be fair, the news that Julio Jones wanted out hadn't broken yet when Kyle Pitts was drafted. But at the time, where were you looking? Who were you interested in? Because I'll go ahead and preface this by saying I was pretty adamant saying this team cannot stop the run, cannot defend at all, cannot protect the passer, and can't run. And you got a 37-year-old quarterback. You're going to have a bridge. You know what? By the time you're any good, your quarterback's too old. So you're going to have a transition there. What good is taking Kyle Pitts? So I was against that at the time. Once the Julio Jones news came out, it made a little more sense. They probably had a better sense of the long term of Calvin Ridley than the rest of us did, who was coming off a 1,300-yard season. But, you know, what were your thoughts with Terry Fontenot's first draft and that number 4 pick?
Yeah, I was kind of torn on the reload versus the rebuild strategy. Like I thought that at that pick, you either take a quarterback or you take Kyle Pitts, who, you know, to me was this generational tight end prospect, and it made sense for the Falcons, you know, and I was on board with taking Kyle Pitts. Now, you know, had it been me running the show, I probably would have taken the quarterback in Justin Fields there, just because
That's where I was.
I
said I would
liked
have taken
him.
Justin Fields at 2, whether we're right or wrong. I'm not changing my, you know, I'm not going to rewrite history. I was
Yeah.
all about Justin Fields at the time.
Yeah. And so, like, to me, like, you want to answer the quarterback conversation. It's the most important position in your team. And to me, a really good quarterback prospect was basically fell in the Falcons' lap, and it was too good to pass up that opportunity, regardless of what you thought about Matt Ryan and his future. But at the same time, like, you know, given Matt Ryan's presence, given Calvin Ridley, given Julio Jones's presence at the time, like, the idea of this team, rather than rebuilding around the new quarterback, reloading and seeing what they could get out of, you know, Julio one last, you know, dance with Ridley and with Pitts and with Ryan. Like, it was intriguing to sort of see. Now, for me, once the news broke that Julio wanted out, the Pitts selection made a little less sense. I get it from the standpoint you need a pass catcher to replace Julio, but at the same time, like, you're not gonna be as successful if Julio is gone. Like, Julio did so much for this offense, and I think we saw that play out last year with their lack of explosiveness, and you know, he masked so many issues for this team because of his ability to do all the things that he could do throughout his career. And so, like, the idea that you were going to be able to reload this thing and get Matt Ryan, like, it made less sense to me in hindsight. But you know, like, I get it. At the same time, you know, Pitts is this intriguing talent. They, along with several other teams picking at the top of the draft, were not in love with Justin Fields so far in his short career. It seems like that skepticism around him has been somewhat validated at this point in time. So, like, I won't be overly critical of that choice. It kind of was an either or sort of situation, kind of a toss up. So I understand. I'm much more forgiving of that choice than I was going into this past year's draft and taking another pass catcher. As I said, you had a need there, but as you mentioned, like, there seem to be so many other issues on this football.
I had needs everywhere.
Yeah, that, like,
don't tell me about needs. There's a need everywhere except tight end in this year's draft. Yes,
yeah, but
need everywhere.
To Drake London's credit, he's played really well these first 2 games, and so he has at least silenced the skeptics and the critics at this point in time. And the team has, you know, looked, as I said earlier, much more competitive, and doesn't seem like those massive needs that we've all perceived them having, particularly in the trenches this offseason. It doesn't seem right now that those needs, that they have some in-house options that have been able to sort of at least stop the bleeding at those spots. But obviously, I still think they're going to have a lot to invest in those areas when we get to next offseason.
Let's hit needs. I'm going to go through the chat again real quick because Albert Knoppers, who is Dutch, I believe. Albert, get to meet you at the Broncos meet and greet. I'm heading out to Denver next week with the Mile High Huddle meet and greet, which will be fun for the San Francisco game. But he says, you know what the name Ridder translates to? It's Dutch for knight. That's kind of cool. We're gonna have to make something of that, the Dutch knight or something, and we can do something without Albert. Might be what the QB, what his name stands for. More importantly, that's what he needs to become. That is kind of cool. The third bomb, he says, if he looks like he did in the preseason or the regular season, there's no need to draft a new QB, and that could be really, really intriguing. Because if someone always needs a quarterback, there's a lot of quarterbacks in this draft. Can you get a heist like the Dolphins did when they traded down and fleeced the 49ers for 3 first-round draft picks? Yes, please. What better for a rebuilding team? Abso-freaking-lutely. And Aaron, that's actually what I've been a proponent of for the last 2 drafts the most, is trading down. But you could have done it with the Pitts draft and gotten some good players towards the back end. This one, nobody wanted to trade up. This was a draft that was heavy from like 30 to 100, not in the back end of the first round. It's like everybody going in the 5 to 15 was the same guy as the guy going 16 to 30. Nobody wanted to trade down. Or do you take Will Anderson? Do you get your destroyer on the edge? Could be a lot of fun there. And Big E Bronco comes is when you start Desmond Ridder, consistency is what you're looking for, as long as he comes out and plays consistent football, keeps you in short third down yardage. What's that? What's short third down yardage? I don't know what you're talking about.
That's when the Falcons run the ball and get stuffed.
I made a note, Aaron, on this when I was watching the game yesterday. I think it may have been into the third quarter when they said this was the first third down longer than 2 yards for the LA Rams. I'm like, and it was 4, and it was 3rd and 4. It's like, God, it's hard to win games if you're, winning 3rd and short is a dream. It absolutely is. Joe Cannon comes in and says, Micah was my pick instead of Pitts. I actually wrote him up as should he be the guy. And that was before I knew he could be such a terror off the edge. This is just a guy I'm like, I could drop him in and have Brian Urlacher, Mike Singletary, any of the old guys that I grew up with when the inside linebacker was still a glamour position, running 4.3s with 4 flat shuttles and 40-inch vertically. The guy was a menace. Taryn Ocean Boy Martin comes in with a heartbroken. Yeah, Terry's one of our more optimistic guys, and I'm feeling for you today, Terry. Says, hey, we got Aaron as a guest today. Yes, we did, Terry. Very fortunate to get Aaron. Very, very happy he was able to join us today. And Clee comes in and kind of says something that I text to a few friends of mine yesterday. The Matt Ryan era is off to a kind of a rough start in Indianapolis, and I know 95% of Falcons fans are keeping one eye up north, up 75, and hang a left to Indianapolis to see how that's going. Right now, it's not going very well. Aaron, needs. I feel like this team, the holes are more glaring because they are fewer. So I've got a couple ideas. It's like, okay, where would you upgrade first? Forget positional value. Where do you see the biggest holes on this team? And remember, anybody over than 2 years with more than 2 years of service is probably on a 1-year deal. So we were talking about, okay, well, Elijah Wilkinson looks good. Caleb McGarry looks good. Yeah, those guys are free agents after the end of the year. So when we're thinking about building, it's easier to re-sign your own guys than it is to poach a free agent. But as you're watching this team, I've got a couple ideas where there's still a couple big holes, not as many, but they stand out more because there aren't as many big holes on this team.
Yeah, for me, it's still about the trenches, right? Even though I said earlier that they're much better there than I thought they would, in order for this team to be good, like legitimately good playoff caliber team, that has to be a strength of your roster. It can't be good enough to keep you competitive, is what I was making the point earlier. That's where they're at right now. Good enough to keep them competitive, but not good enough for them to be able to go into games and say, we're going to control the line of scrimmage and there's nothing you can do to stop us. So for me, I think you're looking at upgrades along the offensive line. Again, Wilkinson, McGarry, we'll see what Dahlman does. Maybe they've done enough to stop the bleeding, but they're not at this point in time long-term solutions. Lindstrom's really the only guy up front that you can look at that you can say with confidence should be a Falcon 3 years from now, right? In terms, and so you need to find more of those players. If that means going out there and spending all that cap space on free agents, if that means investing early round picks in the offensive line, I'm all for it, right? I just think if this offense is going to be good the way that Arthur Smith wants to play, he wants to run the football. And I think you need to have guys that can allow you to do that. And then on the flip side of the defense, I think their success there relies on them having a great defensive front, right? They've made strides there. Grady Jarrett's still going strong. Arnold Ebiketie and Lorenzo Carter and Taquan Graham look like they're giving them a little bit more there than they got from that group last year with a whole bunch of sort of veterans on one-year contracts. But again, it's just not good enough at this point in time. And frankly, you mentioned Will Anderson. I'm big on the Will Anderson hype train. I'm big on the Jalen Carter hype train. Basically at this point in time,
please.
I see Grady Jarrett. He might play like 2 or 3 more years of prime Grady Jarrett, and I just want to get him some help. Right? We spent so many years towards the end of John Abraham's time in Atlanta trying to find somebody opposite him, whether it was Jamal Anderson or Ray Edwards, and we never found that player to give him some help so that he didn't have to carry this team. And I just like if nothing else gets accomplished by this football team, if they don't turn things around and become this playoff team and rebuild it successfully, at least for my sake, I just want to see Grady Jarrett, if he's going to, spend these last couple of years here in Atlanta, give him somebody that we can say, give him some help, take some pressure off of him. And if that's all we get in the Arthur Smith, Terry Fontenot era, that's a win for me, at least from that standpoint.
Yeah, I look at it, and you mentioned the guy 3 years from now on the offensive line. Unfortunately, the way they are Matt Ryaning and Julio Jonesing Jake Matthews' contract, he might be here in 3 years with a $50 million dead cap number. So they've done a good job of getting out from under. There's one more bad contract on this team where they're really upside down on, just one, and it's Jake Matthews. And right now he's serviceable. But I think he's got a $33 million cap hit next year, which he won't play on. So that just means they're going to restructure and kick it down the line again. And eventually that comes due. That bill comes due. The salary cap is not a myth. It will eventually catch up to a certain player, and you're going to have to eat the money on it. The Falcons, I was glad they kind of backed their way into the right move of ripping the Band-Aid off and eating $40 million of Matt Ryan's cap money this year. Real quick, I got about 2 or 3 minutes. I have some points I want to make, but I'm going to be here again. I might not see you again on here real quick. So I want to think, straight to the point, does Deion Jones play for this team again?
I've been skeptical all summer long, but he's still here. I didn't think he would still be here at this point in time. So the odds are greater than I thought they were 3 months ago, but it still seems like very low odds that he's going to play another snap for the Falcons. So we'll see, but it's somewhere between like 0 and 20% chance, I think. But I would have said 3 months ago it's 0%.
Yeah, I think that the odds are better. That's because my odds before were 0. I felt like this was a payoff. The restructure of the contract, I felt like it was here's your money, dude. I don't want to write you a check every month. We're done. Because that's all it was. I mean, it freed up some space this year, which is the only time they've done that for the most part, especially after the season has started. Increased his dead cap next year, but they can roll it over. That's a foreign concept to Falcons fans. Wait, you can. What's extra cap space? We're used to just wasting money. Which for those of you who weren't around in the 80s is still a better problem to have than the Smiths, who wouldn't spend any money, and those guys were just gone. That was anybody. You will never hear me say a bad thing except a negative, an overly negative thing about Arthur Blank. I lived through the Smith era. Real quick, I can't get out of here without shouting out my Andersons. I have been on the Abdullah Anderson train since the week 2 of the preseason, just watching him change directions, little things like this. I'm like, how is this guy not getting more? Then he's cut, and he's re-signed, then he's inactive. Troy Anderson and Abdullah Anderson came in, they played 20 snaps together in the fourth quarter, and they were dominating. Get my Anderson boys on the field, please. You were talking about help. And the other thing, real quick, Aaron, I don't know if for me, one of those gaping holes right now is the edge, and they flipped the snap counts this week. Ogundeji had about 2-1 over Ebiketie last week. It was about 52-48 this week with Ebiketie getting more snaps. Ogundeji is a liability. He is a liability on that left end.
Yeah, I think Ogundeji plays because he's good against the run, right? Like Ebiketie and Malone aren't quite there as run defenders, and that's really what Ogundeji's main contribution is. But in terms of the pass,
that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah,
and that's what's scary is like because for me he's not, and that's when it's like, okay, well, if he's not going to be, Steven Means might at least be able to set an edge, even if he couldn't fall into a quarterback in the backfield. If he's not going to be helping you there, then put Ebiketie in. Just switch him. Get your young guy in with better upside. I know Ogundeji is young. He's a 5th round pick.
Yeah.
What you get out of him is gravy. It's gravy, and right now he's a liability. On that note, any final thoughts before we go?
No. I feel like, again, if you went into the season expecting this team to win 9 or more games, which from what I gather was a very, very small but very vocal minority of Falcons fans.
And they're the ones that will be calling for the coach's head when they fail to meet up there with their expectations.
Yeah, it's tough for those folks. I'll be shedding a couple of tears for you guys out there. But I do think they have an opportunity to sort of rebound these next couple of weeks, and sort of, I think people can be a little patient. For those of you that weren't necessarily expecting this team to win that many games, I do think it's fair to be a little bit patient when it comes to see what Mariota can do these next couple of games, before outright saying it should be Ridder or whatever. But we'll just sort of have to see. It's a long season, and I think the Falcons, as I said, have done more good than bad through 8 quarters of football.
Definitely. And I think I'm still a little bit more jaded than you, because I have a hard time seeing them go into the 12s and getting a win in Seattle this week. But it may be that Denver is just that bad. That may be the thing, because that's a whole other conversation. But we've got to get out of here. I've got to hop over to Mile High Huddle and talk Broncos right now. But Aaron, I can't thank you enough for joining us. Appreciate you stepping up, and it was good to meet you in person, and hopefully we'll get to do this again more soon.
All right. Yeah. Just start about 20 minutes later and I'll be good.
We'll go Falcons for brunch. Anyway, this was Foraging the Falcons. That is Aaron Freeman. You can find him on Twitter at FalcFans, FalcFans, and on Locked On, on the Locked On Network. He is the host for Locked On Falcons. A definite must listen for Falcons fans. I am Scott Kennedy. We will see you again Wednesday morning at our usual time at 9 a.m. And Nick will be back for us. But again, for Aaron, for Scott, we'll see you next time.